All right, let's take a look at that KD ratio. Whoa, we're up to 1.10, and this is when you're not counting bots. SeaBear's getting up there. He's doing pretty good. Also notice under the top badges, I have qualified as master of the little bird. I am at rank 51. And also damage dealt with vehicles is at 5,416,961. So in case you can't tell, I've been flying a lot. Okay, so on this podcast, I want to answer a question that my daughter brought up to me here recently. We were talking about affordability. Again, a topic that comes up a lot on some of my earlier videos. And she said, I thought Trump was going to bring prices down. And I told her, I said, well, he's really kind of between a rock and a hard place. The only way you can truly reduce prices is by deflating the money supply. We got in the problem we were in because Biden spent money like it literally grew on trees. They printed the money. We had a 30% inflation over his term as president in 4 years, which meant your dollar lost 30% of its value. What used to cost 70 cents now costs $1. Or you want to think of it another way, what now costs $1.30 used to cost $1. We lost 30% of our buying power under Biden. Now, how did, and a lot of people ask, if inflation's bad, then deflation, right, shrinking the money supply, must be good. Well, yes and no. Okay, so that's what I really want to talk about here on this podcast. Why is deflation bad? Well, it's bad in the short term. In the long term, it'd actually be very good for the economy and the health of this nation. But in the short term, it would be extremely painful. So in order to understand why prices have not come down, we have to understand how inflation works. And once we understand how inflation works, then we'll talk about how to solve that problem. So I did a video on money, or a podcast on money, early in this in my YouTube career, and I talked about inflation and how it happened. So I'm going to go over it really quick. If you want more detail, please go back and watch that video on money. I think it was number 1 in the series. So let's talk about money. Money today is not founded on anything of tangible value. It is called a fiat currency. The reason why money, which, by the way, is a medium of exchange, so we don't have to barter for goods. I don't have to give you a car in order to get a goat, etc. Money is a medium of exchange upon prices that we all agree upon. And the way our founding fathers originally intended it is that it would be based on gold and silver. And that's under Article 1, Section 10 of the United States Constitution. It states that only gold and silver shall be used as money in this country. So in 1913, they passed the Federal Reserve Act, and we went into a fractional reserve situation. Okay, I need to explain what's going on at this point. Before the Federal Reserve put us into a fractional reserve situation, a 1-ounce gold coin was a $20 piece. It was worth $20. A silver dollar was made from 1 ounce of silver, and that was 1/20th the value of a gold piece. So there were $20, or 20 ounces of silver equaled 1 ounce of gold. Okay, so when the Federal Reserve was created in February of 1913, they started printing dollars without gold in Fort Knox. And that put us into a fractional reserve situation where we had more dollars than gold and silver. That's like printing car titles without making the car. Okay? Now I want you to think about this for a second. A 1 ounce silver coin today is worth about $75. And a 1 ounce gold coin today is worth almost $5,000. Where did all that money go? Where did all that spending power go? It has been pissed away through inflation. History here. Go read a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island if you want the full definition. So, the way it works today is that the government creates U.S. treasuries and sells them to the Federal Reserve, which is a for-profit banking cartel. And then they issue a magic check to the federal government, and the money does not exist until the federal government cashes the check. Once the check is cashed, the money is created for them instantaneously, and the federal government then starts spending it. So, under Ronald Reagan, he did a whole audit and found out that not a penny of your income tax actually pays for anything. It all goes to paying off the interest on the national debt, or is lost through fraud and abuse. Again, read the book. So much detail here, it would take me days and days and days to go over it all. So, money is created. So the federal government then starts paying its bills. So, hypothetically, let's walk through how money and how it is inflated. So, hypothetically, you are a U.S. postal worker. You do your job, you deliver the mail. I'm not going to split hairs and saying that the Postal Service isn't part of the federal government, blah, blah, blah. Just bear with me here. You're a postal worker. You get paid $100. Easy math here, people. Don't spin around the axle. You get paid $100 for a week's work. You take that $100 and you deposit into a bank. Now, all of our banks in the United States are regulated under the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve says that the bank must retain 10% of the deposit in reserve, quote unquote, and that it can then loan out the other 90%. So you deposit your $100 from your job at the Postal Service into the bank. The bank loans out the other $90, keeping $10 in reserve. Let's say hypothetically I borrow the $90 from the bank, and then I go buy some jewelry with it for my wife. The jeweler then takes the $90 that he got paid and deposits it into the bank. The bank says, well, hey, we got money to lend. We just had a deposit. Well, the Federal Reserve says keep 10% in reserve, and I can then loan out the other $81. So then they loan out the next $81 to you. You go out and borrow the $81 because you want an emotional support latte. You buy your emotional support latte. Starbucks deposits the $81 into the bank. The bank says, hey, we have money to lend. The Federal Reserve says we have to keep 10% in reserve. We're going to loan out the other $72.90. Okay, so as this revolving door keeps going around and around and around, the banks will then loan out $900 against that initial $100 deposit, because $100 is 10% of $1,000. So that money is now grown by a factor of 9. Okay, this is called inflation. This is how things start getting more expensive. So now we have more money chasing fewer goods, so now it costs more money to buy those goods. When you inflate the money supply, it's like pouring water into a soup. You dilute the soup. It's not as nourishing, it's not as filling, right? You're not getting as many calories, etc., because you're getting more water than soup. Well, that's what's happening with inflation. So that's why prices went up. Now, there are a couple ways you can bring the prices down. The biggest one would be deflation, and I'm going to go into some details on that here in a second. Number 2, you reduce fuel costs, and that'll take away some of the higher costs because, again, fuel costs are a big portion, everything from the tractors that grows it in the field to trucks driving it to production factories, the factories burning energy to process it and can it and bag it and whatever not, and then more trucks to get it to distribution, and then right? So energy is a huge portion of the cost of goods, final cost of goods. That's one thing Trump was addressing. Number 2 is that you can start reducing regulations when the factories and the farmers don't have to pay so much money to meet regulations. It, again, brings prices down. Now, the number one thing to bring prices down is deflation, which is what I said. So how would you do that? The only way you will deflate the money supply is you start calling those loans due. As long as that debt exists on the books, that money exists. Now, you want to, to deflate the money supply, go pay off your house. When you pay off the house, that money vanishes in the system. Go pay off your car. That money then vanishes from the system because it is no longer on the books as a debt. It no longer exists in circulation. So, anybody who lived through the Great Recession, I remember that I had a credit card with $10,000 worth of credit. I had like $7,000 on that card at the time, and they reduced my credit down to $5,000. So they are pulling back discretionary loans in order to reduce the money supply. And then I had $2,000 that was called due by the bank, payable immediately. Okay? So in order to deflate the money supply, you have to destroy the loans. That $900 in loans that the banks made needs to go away. The only way you make that money go away is you call the loans due. Imagine if the bank calls you and says that you must pay off your car in the next 30 days. Could you do it? If not, they're going to seize your car. Imagine if the bank calls you and says that you have to pay off your credit cards by the end of the month. Could you do it? Imagine if the bank calls and says you have to pay off your house in the next 60 days. Could you do it? This is the pain of deflation. You have to destroy the loans that are in existence. The commercial banks magnify the fiat currency that the federal government created by a factor of 9. The only other way that the federal government can reduce the money supply would be to pay off its own national debt. How do you do that, right? Well, tariffs, that's one. And the tariffs have produced like $250 billion in revenue. But when you have a $6 trillion annual budget, that's kind of like a drop in the bucket. There's talk about selling the lands, the federal lands that are in the United States, and selling those for profit. You have Teddy Roosevelt, who declared a big chunk of the West as federal lands, and he also created the park systems and all this other stuff. But if they sell the lands, they actually could generate enough revenue to pay off the national debt. But that is like only 1/10 of the inflationary problem. So you could bring down inflation by 10% if you pay off the national debt by the federal government, but you still have the problem of the other $900 on that initial $100 deposit in loans that are in existence that is inflating the money supply. So I think it's important that people understand that, the only way you're going to reduce the prices is by deflation, and in the long run, it would be a good thing to reduce the amount of debt that this nation holds, whether it's personal or business or corporate or federal or anything else. But in the short term, you're going to have to come up with some coin to pay off those debts, or they're going to be seizing cars, rings, houses, airplanes, whatever, right, in order to satisfy the demand of the deflation criteria. So that's why I don't think we will ever see the price of food come back down to what it was pre-Biden. Just like we're not going to see cars or stuff go back to pre-Carter, because Jimmy Carter had the same problem. We had inflation, upwards of 50% when Reagan took office in 1980. I remember my dad buying a Dodge Omni in 1978 for $1,800. Well, show me a brand new car on the market today for $1,800. And I don't think we'll ever get back to that unless we absolutely dissolve the Fed and put us back on the gold standard per the constitutional requirements under Article 1, Section 10. So, like I said, my daughter brought this question up the other day. I had to sit down and explain to her what deflation was, what inflation was. I've talked to her before about inflation, but she never kind of pieced it together of how to deflate the money supply. And it just gave me the idea of putting this video together, or this podcast together. I'm trying to keep it short. I got a lot of people saying that the videos are too long, that they're not going to listen to them. But I'm pushing 15 minutes here. I thought you guys should want to know. If you have questions, put it in the comments below. I will absolutely address them. I read every single one. If you like this video, if you think it's informative, please like, share, and subscribe. Pass this out to other people who don't understand why prices are not coming down. Why it is unfair to hold any president or Congress to task to bring food prices back down, or car prices, or anything else, down to pre-pandemic price levels. It's not going to happen. Not without an extremely high amount of pain or some radical action by President, Congress, whoever, to eliminate the national debt. That can reduce our immediate inflation by 10%. We can go 10% negative immediately and bring everything down by 10%. But until you start destroying the money supply, start getting it out of circulation, we're not going back. Just, it's going to take time for salaries and paychecks and everything to catch up. It's usually about 5 to 10 years before your paycheck catches up with inflation, and then we'll be back at status quo. You'll have the same amount of spending power as you had pre-pandemic, and we're about halfway there. So I hope you understand that. Again, if you have any questions, put it below. If you want to hear a longer explanation, please comment below. And I'll be more than happy to do another series on money. Anyways, I'm at 16 minutes. This is SeaBear. Thank you for listening. This is SeaBear out.